Hello, everyone. This is Connor, and for my bipolarity slash late capitalism event, I did the end of apartheid in South Africa. From the late 1940s to early 1990s, South Africa was involved in their own peaceful civil war attempting to end apartheid. Apartheid is a segregation or separation of the blacks and whites. Now, this event didn't necessarily start to engage or ramp up until the early 1990s when Nelson Mandela emerged as a strong candidate for president. Nelson Mandela is widely known as the influential advocate for the end of apartheid and for his historical event as becoming the first black president of South Africa. The election of Nelson Mandela was also the trigger and event, you could say, for my event. Now, the reason that is because when Nelson Mandela was originally elected, his first bill that he passed was the end of apartheid. For my second important person, we have Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu was also a strong advocate for the independence slash anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. He was also one of Nelson Mandela's right-hand mans. He was very expressive about his opinions and even drew international attention. He also was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts. Now, here we have Prime Minister de Klerk. Prime Minister de Klerk was, well, the Prime Minister in South Africa during the time that the independence movement was starting to ramp up. Now, Prime Minister de Klerk saw that apartheid was soon going to end, so he, being the shifty person he was, I mean, look at him, stepped down and got out of South Africa before anything bad happened to him or his family. Now, the anti-apartheid movement was obviously a very big movement in South Africa, as the indigenous peoples felt that it was their right to have their own rule of their own country because they were there thousands of years before the Western Afrikaans, who were colonizers from Western Europe, some 200 years ago. Well, obviously, they were there thousands of years before. Now, the event, as monumental as it was bigger than some expect because of the involvement it had with the community. As you see children engaging in peaceful protests against apartheid. Here, you can see they have their own anti-apartheid day. Now, how this came up is indigenous South Africans and Western journalists thought of an idea to have a peaceful protest day that maybe they could use to tip the boat towards ending apartheid. They elected this day May 1st, and thousands gathered on the streets to oppose apartheid. Now, if apartheid had not been stopped or quote unquote canceled, it could have led into a similar civil war such as the American Civil War, which involved two completely opposing groups who had very strong core beliefs and would even go to standards such as killing, even though the anti-apartheid movement was mostly peaceful. Now, let's answer the question, how did Cold War ideologies influence apartheid in South Africa while interconnecting the world into the 21st century? Now, the Cold War was between America and the USSR, and the USSR had few allies while America had many. These allies were all against communist governments. South Africa had an anti-communist government, so no matter how oppressive the South African government was, Western powers such as Britain and the US still supported it as it was anti-communist. However, when the USSR fell, the South Africans no longer had a reason to implement this oppressive community, and they soon began to feel pressure from outside Western forces such as America and Britain. However, previously they had just been for it. Now let's answer the question, how does apartheid connect to bipolarity? Well, the obvious question, or the obvious answer is the indigenous South Africans thought that it was their personal right to have their own rule of their own country as they were there for some thousands of years, while the new Afrikaans, who were Western colonizers from Europe, who had just arrived 200 years before, took over forcibly and began to implement their society, their religion, their culture, all against these South Africans. And then to add on top of that, they then implemented a segregation law, much like the Jim Crow laws in America. Now, if we look at the legacy of the event, this event helped establish new communities within South Africa that involved mixed races, and also opened up new jobs as discrimination, although prohibited, still happened. But even under the watch of the government, jobs would still be opened up, and this would have the rise of new companies, as previously much indigenous South Africans were not allowed to have their own businesses. But on a more somber note, the conclusion of the event was not as successful as thought. Although the end of apartheid technically happened, it didn't happen but 26, 27 years ago. So there are still major discriminations in South Africa today, even with the anti-apartheid law. But the efforts of anti-apartheid were influential to the world's progress of inclusivity and made major strides toward equality.